Hello, Western Civilization 105 class. Welcome to week 3. There's a lot going on, and I just want to help kind of ground everybody into um, this particular module, and also kind of just help keep the momentum for where you're going. Um, I'm seeing that most of you are doing your best efforts to keep up the work, and it's a lot of work, which I really appreciate, take notice of. And so I want you to keep it going. Um, there's a few things I just need to address really quick before I talk about the content. I do need you to listen to this entire announcement before looking at the rest of this week's module to help you get more out of this module in particular. So, but first of all, I want to say Canvas has a graveyard of my former classes assignments that I have not been able to clean up. So, long story short, you'll look at some assignments that that I'm not assigning you. Okay, the problem I'm having is the way that they set it up is for me to delete those assignments. It creates the possibility I delete other assignments and throw off everything. At some point, I'm going to get this figured out, and maybe they're changing things that maybe it's already changed, and I got to look back at it again to see if it's easier to get rid of old assignments without causing myself any problems with the module. So always just remember that whatever is in the module for the week, those are your assignments. If anything else you see out there shows up, you don't need to worry about it. So I hope that's clear. Um, Also, if you are a minor, um, the schools have been doing more to bring more minors into the classroom to get a college education while you're in middle school or high school. I'm totally supportive of that. Parents and the schools have blockers, right, to make sure that minors are not getting content that they shouldn't be getting exposed to. I don't have a problem with that either. The issue that I'm having, though, is that we are told as professors to just teach what we normally teach. This is a grown-up setting classroom, and that we're told that any student who gets brought in that's at the middle school or high school level is told, the arrangement is set up with the parents and the school that they're agreeing that the student can get a full, normal, what just like everybody else would get, college education. Now, some of these things that are censor, block minors from looking at stuff on the internet it can be very sensitive. Like I could have a documentary clip of a saloon and somebody's got alcohol and a cigarette, and that gets blocked. It could be merely me saying something about cigarettes, or it could be something about violence, and so this causes a lot of problems. I've talked to a lot of administrators. This needs to get resolved. So I'm just going to end it here to say, I need you students that if you're having a problem getting access to those videos, you need your parents or the schools to get them opened up for you, period. Okay. I'm going to keep trying to talk to administrators about how to get this fixed in translation, but I cannot make exceptions. Everybody's expected to watch the videos. If there's a problem for everybody getting access to a video, then I can address that. But so please just keep that in mind. Okay, so moving forward and looking at what we're dealing with today, topic wise. Well, first of all, let me review something. We've covered um, monarchies, right? French Revolution, hugely important. And right now, you're starting to learn things that help explain the modern world in a way that you probably don't have an understanding of right now. And if you're a grown up in my class, an adult who's has basic education, you're probably, this isn't going to be the first time you've heard these things before. But I would argue that for the good chunk of the population, we don't really get a solid education on how to connect the dots of the history that I'm covering right now and where it fits into where we are at currently. So The French Revolution is going to have a huge influence on communists, on nationalists, that we're going to learn more and more about as we come up to modern Western civilization. And then I just used the word communist. Still gets thrown around a lot in modern political discourse in the United States. And so, but I would argue that most people who say communist could not define it properly. And then the other question is, does everybody who calls themselves a communist go by the definition that would be a traditional definition? Okay, so let me back up for a second. You're going to look at all these definitions and you're going to have a big definition essay that I'm going to have you put together. This is challenging. It's also going to be tempting to simply go to your AI and try to like utilize that for everything. I've had my students do this last semester, and they gave me some of them that did that gave me garbage stuff. Okay. I know if you're watching the videos or not. You need to watch the videos. Now you could use AI as a checker to maybe help you or to clarify. Okay. But that's not what goes into the notes. And that's not what's going to go into the essay. And I'm going to know if you're doing that because I deliberately am picking different videos to try to help give you more nuance and kind of broaden your perspective on these things that you need to know to understand the world. Okay. I promise you that one, you're not going to remember all these things. It is an overwhelming amount of information, but by the very act of doing this, you're going to see the oversimplification that these terms, liberal, conservative, socialist, communist, Zionist, get used, and you're going to be aware that these terms are often just kind of thrown around by people without a lot of depth, and just being aware of that is going to help you, move forward as an educated citizen in a much better way. So, for example, a handful, Zoran Mandani in New York, he's one, is mayor of New York, and he is a self-proclaimed democratic socialist. Several other Democrats that are calling themselves that. Bernie Sanders is one of the first. He was an independent and then worked at the Democratic Party, but calling himself democratic socialist. Trump and the Republicans, and sometimes even Democrats, some of the more mainstream ones, have referred to these folks as more or less communists. But it's especially something that the Republicans and Trump has used. And so is that just a pejorative term, or does that have any depth to it? What's the difference between a democratic socialist and a communist? Then you'll hear things like, oh, communism has clearly failed. Socialists have failed. Look at what happened. And then you look at China as a world superpower. And then Trump says that he loves or has an admiration of Xi Jinping and goes there and has all this pomp and circumstance given to him. And he sees him as a strong leader of a powerful nation. And it's a communist state. So I thought you said it failed. And then someone says, wait, but they're not real communists. They're actually using state capitalism now. And I'm like, wait, so now we're returning to trying to be precise about our definitions. So is China communist? Is Zoran Mandani communist? Do these things fail or succeed? What do we mean by all these terms? Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. So then conservatism is going to mean different things in different countries. Liberal as well. I remember when I was in Europe, and the Dutch guy said, I would get confused when you guys say liberal. That means right wing for us in Europe. And what do you mean by right wing? He's talking about economics. It's more like classic liberal. And this is where I'm going to tell if some of you are watching, looking at the videos more carefully, and if you've watched my, announcement, that I want to know you understand the classical term of what a liberal means. And I want you to also see the difference between the way liberal is used in the United States compared to some other parts of the world. And so I make a reference to Australia in the readings. They have the Liberal Party. And I remember when I was in Cambodia, I was watching the Australian news and they were talking about the Liberal Party of Australia, and they sounded exactly like our Republicans here in many ways. And I was so confused. And then I realized also, wow, right. They're using it more like in the original term. In America, it's not used this way, but in Europe, they would simply say left wing, right wing. Okay, so again, I want you to see the importance of understanding all this. Now, lastly, and forgive me for this announcement for being so long, but it's important. I do an introduction to Herzl and topic of Zionism. I know this video is longer. It may bore you, but you need to watch the whole entire thing. I'm going to know if you got the gist of what I'm saying about him or not by how you write it. If you want to understand the current war with Iran right now that the United States is doing with Israel, if you want to understand the Israel-Palestine conflict, if you want to understand why Israel's in Lebanon, and you want to understand the current crisis in the Middle East that's going to probably get worse by the time we finish this class. And by the time we're done, I'm going to explain what's going on in detail. But this is the start that you need to understand. And you're going to hear a lot of people very harshly criticize or say Zionists. You're going to hear people say that you're anti Semitic. If you're not a Zionist, you're going to hear all of these different opinions about Zionism. And that is the foundation of creating the modern state of Israel. So what I want you to do is to make sure you understand Herzl as an important character, just like you need to know who Karl Marx is in relation to communism. Okay? You can love these people or not love these people, but you got to know who they are. You got to understand their actual background and the context that they come in. Now, I started off with work, also looking at works that go to the primary sources. I'm going to tell you the truth. This is one of my expertise, one of the subjects that I know the most. It's also very controversial, and I'm trying to be very careful about how I put it out there so that you can have a full range of understanding on the topic. But most of the time when people talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict or the conflict in the Middle East, and they refer to Israel and Zionism, whether they're pro-Israel or critical of Israel, almost nobody refers to the founding fathers of the state. Like, can you imagine, like, we're going to talk about Russia, never talk about Marx's ideas, and we're especially not going to talk about Lenin or Stalin. That would make no sense. Or United States, we're not going to read anything from Thomas Jefferson. We're not going to study the Federalist Papers, look at the background to what's the creation of the United States of America. But when it comes to to Israel, you have churches that just go to Abraham and think it starts with the Bible, even though the founders of Zionism were actually not even religious, which we'll be covering more and more in detail as we go on with this. And the critics will often kind of not really like they're just a lot of their works just not mentioned. So I want to give you a chance for a background to understand really like kind of who these people are and what's going on with it. And if you have questions, please feel free to talk to me. And if you have issues with how I present it, please feel free to mention it. My mentor on this topic, and I'm just going to give you this a brief story, full disclosure, and then I'm gonna end it here. There's a Jewish man that I met at a bookstore decades ago, about 28 years ago, 27 years ago. And he was an activist type guy. He grew up in the South under segregation, and he saw white supremacy. He saw, he would go to stores as a kid, and drinking fountain would say whites only, blacks only, or colored only, however they said it. And that really bothered him. It really bothered him. And so he took a stand against that, and he was very actively against segregation as he grew up. But he grew up in a Zionist household also. And of course, the Holocaust was brought up, things like that. But he falls in love with this Palestinian woman. And he doesn't give me a lot of details on this, but he basically was told, that he didn't really see the other side of the story. And so he goes to Israel, he goes to the West Bank, and he sees things, and it changes his perspective on Zionism and the way that Israel treats the Palestinians. And he came and he shared with me those stories and brought me other sources to look at. So I got a sort of critique or a different understanding of maybe of Zionism through the lens of the Palestinian perspective by him, uh, you know, 27 years ago. And so, but what I'm trying to do is also when I'm here is you'll notice I pick a text that is actually a man who defined himself as a Zionist. So I'm hoping that by the time you're done with my class, you will see how, uh, uh, you know, Zionists, pro-Zionists have made a case for that argument, and those who are more critical of that, what they're saying. And also, lastly, for me to say, I want people to be treated equally and fairly everywhere in the world. I am not interested in promoting the idea of hatred of somebody, anyone. But I think that it's fair to be critical of ideas that come into the world and the way that those ideas translate into how they operate in the real world, right? So that's all I'm going to have to say about that. I hope you all will be able to engage in this fully and to be able to really dive deep. And again, please feel free to contact me if you want to go a little bit deeper into any of this. All right. Have a good week. We'll be in touch.